At times in our Christian walk, we come up with some really dumb ideas that we know the only way it could possibly work out is if God puts a hand, threading on a thin line between faith and foolishness. An idea with a success probability so low that we already prepare ourselves for the evident possibility of failure. Throughout the Bible, there are many plans like this that the only way it could have possibly worked out is because God co-signed the plan. David and Goliath and Esther's "If I perish, I perish" are two prime examples. But there's a particular scenario that takes 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 25, which says, "For the foolishness of God is wiser than men," to another level. One in which two young men scale a cliffside to take on the enemies who taunted them to do it, thinking they won't even dare to do it. A story that I personally label as Divine Foolishness Co-signed by God. 1 Samuel 14 gives us the account of Jonathan and his armor-bearer scaling a cliffside to take on a Philistine garrison, all while using a very questionable level of justification to why God has permitted them to do such an act. What exactly was the plan to begin with? Well, we'll be discussing the entire thing in this installment of Unsung Bible Stories, where we present to you stories in the Bible you probably haven't heard about and are rarely preached or oversimplified in a church sermon. If the Bible was an anime, these will be the filler episodes that everyone skips over trying to get to the main plot point episodes. If you are enjoying the video thus far, then why not consider leaving a like and subscribing for more installments of this series, and even feel free to share your own personal Divine Foolishness Co-signed by God stories with us in the comments. But with that out of the way, let's dive into 1 Samuel chapter 14, and I'll be reading from the ESV. One day Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Geba in the pomegranate cave at Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men,
including Ahijah the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh, wearing an ephod.
Yeah, sometimes Bible names, even though they may be simple, at times is a fight for me with my accent. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone within the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison. There was a rocky crag on one side and a rocky crag on the other side. The name of one was Beos and the name of the other was Sina. The one crag rose on the north in front of Michmash and the other on the south in front of Geba. And Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few." This is where things get. Oh jeez. And his armor-bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul." Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men and we will show ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand still in our place and we will not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand, and this shall be the sign to us." I know some people I know we at times ask God for a sign, but this is quite the sign to ask for. So both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines, and the Philistines said, "Look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." And the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor-bearer and said, "Come up to us and we will show you a thing." And Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel." Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, and his armor-bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer killed them after him. That is quite insane. To understand it, you could look, this picture from the Action Bible is the perfect representation of what went on. They had to scale a mountainside, well, a cliffside even, to get up there. And that first strike which Jonathan and his armor-bearer made killed about 20 within, as it were half a furlong's length in an acre of land. And there was a panic in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and even the raiders trembled. The earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. And the watchmen of Saul in Geba of Benjamin looked, And behold, the multitude was dispersing here and there. Then Saul said to the people who were with him, Count and see who has gone from us. And when they had counted, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. Jonathan and his armor-bearer were causing chaos in the Philistine camp. I mean, think about that. 2 Hebrew boys scale a mountainside to take on the Philistines by themselves with no backup. That's like watching a movie and we know the characters have plot armor, but then the plot armor has plot armor. There are stories in the Bible where when God is on their side, it's like the plot armor has plot armor. Okay, I'm done. Let me continue. So Saul said to Ahijah, Bring the ark of God here, for the ark of God went at that time with the people of Israel. Now while Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the camp of the Philistines increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, Withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and went into battle. And behold, every Philistine's sword was against his fellow, and there was a great confusion. So imagine this happening. What Jonathan and his armor-bearer spiraled was great confusion in the Philistine camp. Great confusion to the point the Philistines were attacking the other Philistines in the midst of battle. You have Philistines fleeing, and you have Philistines who are fighting against each other. This is too funny to me, I'm sorry. Now the Hebrews who had been with the Philistines before that time and who had gone up with them into the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. So there were Hebrews who were amongst the Philistine camp. I don't know if it means captured or if they were working with the Philistines or whatnot, but when they saw what was happening, the own people within their camp decided to fight with Saul and they as well. Okay, let me continue. Likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they too followed hard after them in battle. So you have Jonathan and his armor bearer on one side, you have the Philistines fighting against each other, you have the Hebrews who were within the Philistine camp fighting against the Philistines, you have the Israelites who were hiding throughout the hill country of Ephraim because the Philistines were pushing into the territory, so some of them went to hide, fighting against the Philistines. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle passed beyond Beth Aven. Now you would think that God working out something like that miraculous from a very faithful yet dumb on paper plan that the Israelites will completely take over the Philistines. But no, this is a story of faith and foolishness. We just covered the faith, now let's cover the foolishness. And the men of Israel had been hard pressed that day, so Saul had laid an oath on the people, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged on my enemies. So none of the people had tasted food. Now when all the people came to the forest, behold, there was honey on the ground. And when the people entered the forest, behold, the honey was dropping. But no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. So he put out the tip of his staff that was in his hand, and dipped it in the honeycomb, and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. Then one of the people said, Your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, Cursed be the man who eats food this day. And the people were faint. Then Jonathan said, My father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright, because I tasted a little of this honey. How much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of the enemies that they found. For now the defeat among the Philistines has not been great. So a little context. Saul, just as Jonathan, had quite a dumb plan. But with Jonathan's plan, God co-signed and allowed to work. Saul made an even dumber plan that God did not co-sign because it was plain foolish. Think about it for a second. You and your men were at war and hungry, traveling and fighting for miles. And in that hunger, instead of feeding them, you put a ban on eating, thinking that God will turn things around because of your impromptu mandatory fast. That's not an honorable decision, it's quite an arrogant one, and we'll get to why it was as we go along. So, as a result, continuing to verse 31, they struck down the Philistines from Michmash to Aijalon, and the people were very faint. The people pounced on the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slaughtered them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. They were so hungry that they decided to eat the sheep, oxen, and calves raw. Then they told Saul, "Behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood." And he said, "You have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone to me here." And Saul said, "Disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, Let every man bring his ox or his sheep and slaughter them here and eat, and do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood." So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night, and they slaughtered them there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar he built to the Lord. Then Saul said, "Let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light. Let us not leave a man of them." And they said, "Do whatever seems good to you." But the priest said, "Let us draw near to God here." And Saul inquired of God, "Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel?" But he did not answer him that day. And Saul said, "Come here, all you leaders of the people, and know and see how this sin has arisen today. For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, though it may be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die." But there was not a man among all the people who answered him. Then he said to all Israel, "You shall be on one side, and I and Jonathan my son will be on the other side." And the people said to Saul, "Do what seems good to you." Therefore Saul said, "O Lord God of Israel, why have you not answered your servant this day? If this guilt is in me or in Jonathan my son, O Lord God of Israel, give Urim. But if this guilt is in your people Israel, give Tumim." And Jonathan and Saul were taken, but the people escaped. So let the context on what is Urim and Tumim, according to Christian commentary sources. Urim and Tumim means lights and perfections. We aren't sure what they were or how they were used. Many authors think they were a pair of stones, one light and another dark, and each stone indicated a yes or no from God. Similar to how back then they used to cast lots to get an answer from God, and God used to work through it in order to give them answers and stuff. Then Saul said, "Cast a lot between me and my son Jonathan." And Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you have done." And Jonathan told him, "I tasted a little honey with the tip of the staff that was in my hand. Here I am, I will die." And Saul said, "God, do so to me and more also. You shall surely die, Jonathan." Then the people said to Saul, "Shall Jonathan die who has worked this great salvation in Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, there shall not one hair of his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day." So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. This story is a perfect example of the difference between faith and foolishness. Jonathan exhibited faith in God, and in return God worked through him. Even though his plan on paper was definitely foolish, the foolishness of God is wiser than man's wisdom. On the other hand, Saul exhibited foolishness, then tried to add God into the mix, and God did not answer him. My leaders have a saying where they tell us God has given us that thing called common sense and good thinking capabilities to make decisions at times. We can't want to be asking common sense questions and want to know why he hasn't burst through the clouds and given us an answer. Saul is the king of God's chosen nation at war, in a war that God allowed them to go into in the first place. To then take to the extreme and place a mandatory fast on the people in the midst of the war is acting against all common sense war tactics of Israel. The Enduring Word commentary says that Jonathan, in his bold trust in the Lord, had just struck a mighty blow against the Philistines. Now it was the job of the army of Israel under King Saul to finish the job by striking down the fleeing Philistine army. On this day of battle against the Philistines, Saul declared a curse. On the surface, this plan sounds so spiritual, but a quote from verse 24 which says, "Before I have taken vengeance on my enemies, so none of the people tasted food. This shows that Saul's focus was wrong. Saul put the army of Israel under an oath so he could have taken vengeance on his enemies. If he regarded it as his battle, he should simply fast for himself. Saul showed that even in doing something spiritual like fasting, his focus was on himself and not on the Lord. And this story is also the clear beginning of Saul's prideful downfall. But that's a story for another time, because that's it for this installment of Unsung Bible Stories. If you watched to this point in the video, then why not consider leaving a like and subscribing with post notifications if you haven't already, and even sharing the channel with others. On this channel, we primarily break down Christian and non-Christian fictional stories with emphasis on those that have some sort of Christian theme or scenes like this.
He named himself the Creator, the Father, the Almighty. He is none of those, but just an angel, like ourselves.
But we also make more generalized Christian content like this, as well as an initiative to do Christian creative projects ranging from making replicas of different places in the Bible to recreating scenes from Christian fictional films into a small-scale video game. We actually have an ongoing project making the fight scene from the Pilgrim Progress into a game in Unreal Engine, streaming the process every Friday from 7 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time right here on the channel. If you're looking for something else to watch on the channel, then I highly recommend another scenario where a particular person asks God a lot of questions with a very special answering method from God, which is available in the end card right now.